Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to provide some context to this complicated issue, including as heard in the 2 hearings before the Joint Committee on Revenue. We're all working hard to keep Massachusetts competitive, and there are concerns statewide that if Boston sets aside its residential business tax balance even temporarily, it will ripple through every community. Property taxes currently fund over 70% of Boston's revenue, nearly 2/3 of which are paid by commercial, industrial, and other non-residential properties. The current influx of remote workers, the rise of empty office space, and slowing real estate development are creating growing anxiety that the loss in equity for business owners could create a budget gap for the city that would necessitate raising residential taxes. To temper the potential budgetary load on residents, the mayor seeks to swing the load to businesses, but many are worried, on the other hand, about the effects of this proposal. For perspective, consider data from the 2023 Lincoln Institute 50 state property tax comparison, which found that for residential properties, Boston ranked as the 3rd lowest in the country. Apartment properties in Boston ranked in the 11th lowest, and commercial properties in Boston were ranked at the 27th highest taxed. Boston's commercial sector is essential not only to the city's economic vitality, but also to the state's. Tamara Small, Chief Executive of the National Association of Industrial and Office Properties Massachusetts, said, "This is essentially being viewed as kicking them when they're down. This is really just going to exacerbate the value loss property owners are seeing." These concerns suggest that this proposal would only be a temporary solution to what is realistically going to be a longer-term issue. Mayor Wu had originally predicted that the property taxes for Boston residents could increase by as much as 33% in the coming year without this measure. City officials then presented new research in October predicting a more modest increase of around 14%. Co-founder and executive director of the Boston Policy Institute, Gray Maynard, testified that this year's decline in commercial property value and the subsequent increase in residential property taxes is not a one-time event, but rather will continue happening for the coming years, raising the question of whether the 3-year timeline in the proposed bill will have a sufficient tempering effect. Doug Howgate is quoted in, as recently as yesterday's Boston Globe, that the state is racing to lock up funds before President Trump takes office. The order of magnitude between state and federal resources is so large that it's important for people to recognize that Massachusetts simply does not have the capacity to replace federal dollars. The state should prepare for a new era. That was his quote. I understand that, in fact, just before Thanksgiving, the new property valuations for the city of Boston only just came out. The point is, there's no doubt that how we pursue this issue will set a precedent for municipalities across the state. As we review the timeline of this legislation, it's clear that this issue has evolved just since the original bill was reported to the Committee on Revenue. A public hearing for that bill was scheduled as soon as possible, July 16th, which left less than 3 weeks before the end of formal session. House Ways and Means reported the bill favorably, and it was passed to be engrossed on July 30th. The bill was then referred to Senate Ways and Means in early August. Now, considering the widespread potential consequences for the state, it became clear that a compromise would be necessary to move forward. The Senate President led an effort to bring all the interested parties together. The compromise effort did not offer a decrease, however, in the proposed 8% budget, even while the state's budget increase was kept to a 3%, amid some of the same challenges that Boston has raised, such as state union contract increases. The revised bill before us, House 5099, was filed and referred to Revenue by the House just recently on November 6th, and a joint hearing was held on November 20th. House Ways and Means recommended ought to pass with a new draft substituted, 5114, on November 21st. In fact, on November 21st, as well as the 22nd, the bill was brought before the House, and twice, Rep. David DeCoste doubted the presence of a quorum over concerns for significant negative economic consequences to the entire state, including foreclosure possibility, considering vacancy rates averaging over 40% in highly leveraged properties. The bill was passed to be engrossed by the House on November 25th. I would be remiss not to emphasize the leadership that Senate President Spilka has shown throughout the process to address the strong differences between the city's proposal and the concerns of the business community. Senate President convened the parties, including the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation, NAIOP Massachusetts, and the Boston Municipal Research Bureau, and worked tirelessly in an effort to ensure that all were well represented. As we all know, navigating complex policy decisions requires a steady hand and a commitment to bringing people together. Senate President Spilka has done just that, and her ability to move these deliberations forward has been crucial to getting us to this point. Today's vote is important not just for Boston, but for the entire Commonwealth. It affects our constituents who own businesses and property in Boston, and many municipalities are watching to see how the legislature acts with respect to changing the balance of the residential business tax balance. I thank the members for their attention and for the opportunity to provide some history on the bill.